Hello, everyone. This is Parrish Alford with the Daily Journal. I'm joined by Logan Lowery, our Mississippi State beat writer, and this is Double Coverage, a production of the Daily Journal. We're glad you've chosen to click in with us today. We're going to talk all things Mississippi State and Ole Miss for the next half hour or so. Logan, how are you, man?
I'm doing good, Parrish. You're looking a year older than the last time I saw you when we did this last week. Had a big birthday yesterday.
Yeah, had a big birthday yesterday. Number 52, Logan, 52. Now we could spend all the program talking about all kinds of stories off the Ole Miss beat. I've been covering them now since 2002. I could talk Mississippi State a little bit, Logan, from 1996 to 2001. Man, I can talk to you about that 1998 team that won the SEC West. I can take you through Wayne Madkin's time and the change over to Kevin Fant. I can go back to Derek Tate. So I can talk some Mississippi State history as well. Lots of people forget that.
Yeah, we may have to do that this summer when things get real slow. If we still do the podcast through the summer, we may have to get into all that.
Yeah, we can dive back into that history series. Logan, you can talk a little history too, man. I remember when you were the Ole Miss beat writer for the West Point newspaper. So, you've been around a little while too.
Yeah, I've done my. Yeah, I was actually a student at Ole Miss for 1 year and was served as the Ole Miss beat writer for the Commercial Dispatch for that 1 year. Then I took the job in West Point and kind of bounced back and forth between Mississippi State and Ole Miss. I really just based it on who had the better game that Saturday, and I would either make my trip to Oxford or make my trip over to Starkville and try to cover whichever I thought was the better football game for that week. And sometimes it was a toss up. You had to kind of flip a coin because either they were both playing somebody bad or both playing somebody good. But I enjoyed that and learned a lot through that experience. And here we are. Now we've both covered both of these teams.
Hey, folks, before we move on, I want to remind you about another couple of podcasts to search for, productions of the Daily Journal. Be sure to check out The Memo, our news podcast diving deep into Northeast Mississippi every Thursday. And check out Prep Rally for all your high school sports needs. That's coming to you every Wednesday. Look for those wherever you go to find your podcast. And lots of good stuff there. Logan and I are here with you every Thursday, give or take, depending on schedules. Right now, Logan, it's a baseball schedule, man. We are here in May, the final month of the regular season. The SEC tournament coming up at the end of this month, and lots of baseball left, lots of ground still to cover. Ole Miss is in pretty good position at 12-9 in conference play, 35-11 after a 10-3 win over Arkansas Pine Bluff Wednesday night at Swayze Field. 35 wins. They've already won 3 more than they won all of last season. But while Ole Miss is in good position, Logan, to finish strong, maybe earn a national seed, to achieve a lot of goals, they would be in better position had they been able to close out some SEC games earlier in the past few weeks. I was just looking through the notes a few minutes ago. The Rebels now are in South Carolina, getting ready to take on the Gamecocks this weekend. That's a series that begins on Friday. But Logan, I'm looking through the notes and I see in games decided by 2 runs or fewer in SEC play, Ole Miss is 5-7, and that's something they really need to get turned around. But lots of goals still on the table for this team. Yes, they could be in a better position, but they're in a pretty strong position right now if they continue to play well and do the things they have done on the weekends, as they did in the series with LSU when they won 2 games last week in Oxford. So how does Mississippi State shape up for the month now?
Right now, they're they're just trying to get into the SEC tournament. They're in if the season ends today, which it obviously doesn't. Still got 3 weekends left. But if the season ended today, Mississippi State would be in. They would hold that final spot ahead of Tennessee and Alabama. Alabama's pretty much out of it unless they really go on a run. They're cellar dwellers down there at the 14 spot. Mississippi State's 1 game ahead of Tennessee entering this weekend, and they want to try to stay ahead. Mississippi State goes to Tuscaloosa this weekend to play Alabama, and they really need to make some hay while they've got an opportunity to do that. I mean, obviously, it's going to be a crazy weekend in Tuscaloosa with graduation going on. So, right there adjacent to, Coleman Coliseum's right there adjacent to the baseball stadium. So, it's going to be a lot of congestion, a lot of people around the ballpark. I don't know if they'll actually make it into the ballpark. I'm sure some of them will. And, State needs to play well this weekend because they go on the road to Kentucky next weekend. Then they finish up with Florida here in Starkville. So that's a pretty daunting last 2 weeks for Mississippi State. So they need to take advantage of this opportunity at Alabama this weekend when they get a chance to. They're going to change some things up with the pitching this weekend, or possibly change some things up with the pitching. Connor Pilkington's still going to be your Friday night guy. Ethan Small's still going to be your Saturday starter. But Sunday's left TBA. Jacob Billingsley's been that guy throughout most of the season for Mississippi State, been that Sunday starter, a fifth-year senior, a guy with a lot of experience there. But, just that he's been so inconsistent throughout the year, and they're looking to maybe shake things up on Sunday and maybe switch some things around. We'll have to kind of see how that all shakes out this weekend in Tuscaloosa. But that's something Gary Henderson mentioned to us yesterday as a possibility, and then it came out this morning what the rotation was going to be, and sure enough, his TBA has made his return to the Mississippi State rotation. But right now, State's 3 games above 500 for the year. Some projections have Mississippi State playing in the postseason. D1 baseball this week, their projections have Mississippi State playing. I believe it was at NC State. In their regional if things ended today. And then I looked at Baseball Americas, and they had Mississippi State as the number 2 first 4 out. So one publication had them in, one publication had them out. Still 3 weeks to play. Mississippi State needs to make the best of this chances. Probably if they do get to Hoover, they may have to make some noise in Hoover to make the postseason. But we'll have to see kind of how things shake out there. But, just kind of been a tumultuous year for State, with the coaching turnover and just everything that's kind of gone on. It's, all those road games earlier on in the year, the stadium half finished, a lot going on with State this year. And, they're trying to keep their head above water right now.
Well, I know, Logan, they still need to win some games, but they've got 6 very impressive RPI wins with 3 against Ole Miss and 3 against Arkansas. And I'm sure that's kind of fueling some of those NCAA projections right now, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they've got some good wins. They've also got some bad losses on that schedule. So that's kind of, it's kind of even things out. I mean, they played better of late. I mean, they're playing better baseball right now than they have been at certain points of the season. But still they've got some games that they lost at McNeese State. Just some terrible losses on that schedule. And then they do have one midweek game left. They go to Hoover this upcoming week to play Troy, and Mississippi State will be the home team in Hoover, I guess, because it's the SEC venue there at the Hoover Met. So Mississippi State's going to be the home team in Troy's home state of Alabama.
Well, that's interesting. Who do you think are the candidates to start on Sunday? They've had this guy Billingsley that they've kept there for a long time, but what are the options available there?
It's really, I don't know, because Denver McCrary's kind of been their midweek guy, and he's kind of been up and down. It's kind of the same story as Billingsley. It's kind of, you don't know what you're going to get from him from one start to the next. A guy that could be a possibility is JP France. He's pitched so well for Mississippi State out of the bullpen the last 3 or 4 weeks, and he began the year as a starter. He was a starter at Tulane for all those years, and I actually talked to him yesterday. And he wants to start. That's kind of what he's used to. But he's willing to do whatever he can to help the team. But he's pitched so well in that long relief role for the State out of the bullpen that may be something that's on Gary Henderson's mind to give him another opportunity to be a starter. Early on, they tried to make him a midweek starter, and he just struggled finding the strike zone. Just was very inconsistent with that. He's pitched so well out of that bullpen of late that may be something that Gary Henderson tries out this weekend against Alabama.
Speaking of the bullpen, Logan, it was only 1 inning last night, and 2 of the batters that Dallas Woolfolk faced for Ole Miss were sub-200 hitters. but there was something that looked a little different about Woolfolk last night. He faced the minimum. He had 2 strikeouts. Didn't really no pressure put on him, and he just looked different. He had better control, better command, and the biggest thing is the velocity was back for Dallas Woolfolk. He was consistently at 94. This is a guy who last year had 12 saves. He was the guy in the end for Ole Miss. He was the closer, and he was a very successful closer. Went on and pitched successfully with USA Baseball in the summer, and for whatever reason, he comes back this season to Ole Miss, and his velocity is down. His opponent batting average is way up, and just frankly had not been a factor this season. I mean, it was early on that Parker Caracci replaced him as the closer. Ole Miss was fortunate in the regard that they had Caracci come on. Now, they've had a lot of people who have not had sustained success in that bullpen, but by and large, Caracci has held the spot of closer for Ole Miss. So last night there was a glimpse of what Dallas Woolfolk had been, and he was very encouraged by that after the game. Looks like he's regaining some confidence. And so if he can turn the corner and become closer to the player that he was last year, that would be a huge lift for this Ole Miss bullpen. And I will say about Caracci as well. His velocity was up last Saturday in Game 3 against LSU. He had a strong outing as well. He has blown some leads recently. Okay, we've seen his velocity dip a little bit. You know, and you ask the question, Logan, and nobody can really tell you about velocity and why it's low and why it's high. But I got 2 interesting responses. One from assistant coach Mike Clement, who handled post-game interviews for Mike Bianco last Saturday after Game 3. We saw Bianco kind of rushing off as soon as the players' meeting broke up, and you never know, what's happening then. But he was trying to get out quickly to get over to South Haven to watch his son play in an Oxford High School playoff game. So that happens from time to time. So Clement says velocity, man, sometimes it's just about the weather. He says he didn't really know why Caracci was down and back up, but it was a warmer day in Oxford, and Caracci was hitting 94 and 95 on the gun and had a good outing. It wasn't a flawless outing. We're talking about Game 3 against LSU when Ole Miss took the 9-7 lead in the 7th on the 3-run home run by Thomas Dillard. Caracci comes in the 9th with no outs and 2 on base. So a difficult situation right away. Well, it takes him a little bit to get into a rhythm, and that's not what you want from a closer. Ideally, that guy's going to come in and be able to, throw strikes right away. So he walks a guy and loads the bases. Then he gets a strikeout. Then he walks another. So he walks in a run. But at the end of the day, Caracci ended the game with a fly ball, had 2 strikeouts. He did have the 2 walks, but his velocity was back. And I thought in that Game 3 that the strike zone was pretty small. Now, it wasn't small only for Parker Caracci, and pitchers need to make that adjustment when that happens. But it was a tight strike zone there by the home plate umpire. So I thought an encouraging appearance there for Parker Caracci, and now one in the midweek for Dallas Woolfolk. And look, if you're Ole Miss right now, you're hanging on anything that could signal a turnaround for this bullpen. And those guys with increased velocity and maybe just a touch better control by Caracci, you need to get work through those walks. This could be a strong bullpen again, like it was earlier in the year. Another guy who could make it that way and could make it a deeper bullpen is Houston Roth, the sophomore from Oxford. Looks like he's going to throw this weekend, has worked his way back from a hamstring injury. He was the Rebels' midweek starter, the primary starter most of the season. And it was several weeks ago that Bianco announced the switch, going with Jordan Fowler there to make Roth available for the bullpen on SEC weekends. And right at that time, Roth had a hamstring injury. So we've not seen him in that role of bullpen relief for Ole Miss. So he could make this a deeper bullpen at South Carolina. So every little bit helps. That's been a sore spot for Ole Miss. We've talked about their struggles to hold leads. Logan, 5-7 in SEC games decided by 2 runs or fewer. So maybe the bullpen is going to turn a corner. The biggest thing I've seen from this team, Logan, has been the depth on offense and how they have been able to have sustained success there. They will need to continue that for these 9 remaining SEC regular season games to get where they want to go. It won't be easy. 2 of the series on the road, one of them at Alabama to close, and they have Auburn and Casey Mize coming in the weekend before in Oxford. So, not necessarily an easy finish for Ole Miss. South Carolina isn't as dominant as they have been in the past, but this is a team that's playing better baseball right now, and it's South Carolina. They know how to play baseball there. Okay, long history of success, and looks like it might be turning a corner. One thing I'll note about the Gamecocks, Logan, just looking at their numbers as a pitching staff, the ERAs are not that impressive. In fact, South Carolina as a staff has a 4.28 ERA, which is number 11 in the SEC. So not that stout. But you go across the stat page and you see the opponent batting average. Opponents are hitting only 227 against them. That's pretty good. So they've been able to get these guys out when they've put it in play or with strikeouts or whatnot. But it's the walks, and SEC leading 184 that have been the primary issue for South Carolina pitching. So, if you're Ole Miss, you go into this series, you don't have to hit 500. You may have a couple of runners on base, but you've got to be clutch, and you've got to get the big and timely hits in the way that Thomas Dillard did in the 7th inning last week to clinch the LSU series. I should say, put Ole Miss in position to clinch it with Will Etheridge going another scoreless inning there, and then Caracci following him in the 9th. So some reason for hope from the bullpen. They've got to remain consistent offensively, got to continue to show depth. The picture of that depth last week was Tim Rowe, who was inserted when Ryan Olenek, a guy who was on a 19-game hitting streak, now it's 20. Olenek needs some time off for shoulder soreness, a labrum injury. All right. And Rowe comes in and he has 7 hits in his first 8 at-bats over 3 games. Most of those are doubles. The ball's just jumping off his bat. Now, he's cooled off a little bit. He's been pitched a little differently. Teams are going to pick up on that. But, what a lift when you can take out a guy who is your leading hitter right now, Olenek at 398. He'll be available for this weekend against South Carolina. And you plug in a guy like Rowe, who is just a really strong and powerful swing, ball just jumping off his bat right now. He's got to make some better decisions in terms of pitch selection and be a little more patient, particularly with the South Carolina staff that will issue some walks. But seeing a lot of depth from Ole Miss offensively right now. Gray Kessinger, another example, a guy who was hitting around 350 the second week of SEC play, had fallen into the 280s and is back up around 311 right now. So that's something Ole Miss needs to continue heading down the stretch.
Yeah, and baseball wasn't the only team that we talked to yesterday in the media. We actually talked to Ben Howland yesterday as well. He actually called a press conference on his own. Now, we just talked to Ben Howland about 2 weeks ago, but he called a press conference, wanted to talk to everybody and just tell everybody how excited he was about this team and the fact that he had 4 of the players, 4 of the underclassmen that had declared for the NBA draft have all decided to come back to Mississippi State. And, that's talking about Quindary Weatherspoon, Nick Weatherspoon, Lamar Peters, and Eric Holman. All those guys have decided to come back. And, those 4 starters, they got all 5 starters coming back. They've got their top 6 scorers coming back from last season. So Mississippi State's loaded, and they're bringing in some pretty good players as well. You look at a guy like Reggie Perry, who was a McDonald's All-American, coming in, a 4-star guy in Robert Woodard. DJ Stewart, another 4-star shooting guard out of over there in the Delta. And then they've got a former Arizona transfer, Jethro. I still can't pronounce his last name.
Bodine? Is it Bodine?
Jethro something. Jethro. It's one of those African names. I'm gonna have to get the hang of it, but anyway, Jethro's coming in, and Ben Howland still has one scholarship available. So, he may not be done with this signing class of yet. This is a top 15 signing class that he's bringing in to add to what he already had from last year. No, in year 3 under Ben Howland, they go to the semifinals of the NIT, and made a pretty good run. And I think that team gained a lot of confidence from that run to Madison Square Garden this past year. And I think they're in for big things. A lot of these college basketball experts have Mississippi State not only in the top 25, but pretty much a lock for the NCAA tournament for next year as well. So we'll have to see if that translates and comes to fruition. But a lot of talent coming back for Mississippi State men's basketball, and that's a good sign, because that's a program that really just hasn't been good the last 5-6 years. This past year was their first postseason experience since 2012. So it's been quite a drought for Mississippi State on the men's basketball side. So we'll have to see, how that translates. And he's bulking up the schedule, the non-conference schedule. He's talked about, he's playing a lot of Power 5 schools throughout that non-conference schedule, and he feels his team, needs it. They're going to be good enough to handle that type of schedule and boost that resume, so they can ensure, that NCAA tournament bid when that time comes around next March.
Folks, that's it for this edition of Double Coverage, a production of the Daily Journal. We thank you for clicking in with us today. Be sure to check out the Memo, our news podcast diving deep into Northeast Mississippi. That's every Thursday, and look for Prep Rally for all your high school sports needs, coming to you every Wednesday. And Logan and I will be back with you next week for another round of Double Coverage.